Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatihira Vanachari Yamunatihira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatihira Vanachari Yamunatihira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatihira Vanachari Yamunatihira Nachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gauranga, Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki jai. Shri Shri Panchatattva ki jai. Shri Shri Madan Mohan ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bo. Thank you all for coming. The Bhagavad Gita class on Wednesday. David, right? Yeah, good to see you here, man. Mahabhavi Prabhu, thank you for coming and joining us. Hari Bo. Thank you everyone for being here. So we'll read from the Bhagavad Gita. It'll be chapter 4. I believe it was 38 we prepared. Yeah, 438. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimarandasya Gyananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishakhanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome again, everybody. This is the Mangala Charan. It's the auspicious invocation. We had a wonderful guest, a visitor, a sannyasi, a Swami. His name is Bhakti Ananda Tirtha Swami Maharaj. And so Maharaj came and visited us just a week and a half or so ago. And he had 2 minutes to give us. He was invited to come and speak. And so maybe all in all he spoke for 4 or 5 minutes. And part of that was offering prayers. And so when Maharaj started, he said, well, why did I do this? You know, if I only have so much time, what should we do? And so to start with an auspicious invocation, it really changes the atmosphere. Because we came from wherever we came from, and then how do we pause? How do we really enter, in a way, a space of meditation, a way to contemplate, and then be ready to receive something that is auspicious. And so that's why we chant these prayers. They're really beautiful. For someone like me, a while ago I learned them by heart, and so it took me a while, because it's not easy language, but still when I chant them, there's you can perceive it, and Bhagavad Gita speaks about this in 9.2, that we can have direct experience. And so when we're able to slow ourselves down, at least for myself, I need to slow myself down, and to really become present, then the before and after are really different. And I've been to some universities where I was asked to speak, and we go and distribute books on the university campuses, but we don't go into the buildings that much. But then we go into a classroom. Then what's going on in the classrooms? That some math or English or something, some whatever subject is being taught. But we come there, and then in order to get everybody on the same page and in a way elevate the consciousness, we chant these prayers, and then we're connected to the source. And so a week ago I was asked to give this class, and I actually let me start again by welcoming you and really begging you and asking you for your blessings, so that I may speak something that is useful, purifying for myself, but also good for the audience to hear. Because I remember at the end of the class last week, we were talking about Guyam, we were talking about something confidential, something secret. And so what is that secret? And in a way, that's what we do here. When we had, was it Madhavananda Prabhu came and visited, and he said, there's no sermon going on here. I'm not lecturing to you. What is happening is this is a sangha of devotees, and there are loving exchanges that happen when devotees get together, right? And it's guyam, so it's something that is actually confidential. And so, what is that highest? The highest confidential knowledge is I am a servant. And so one of the verses that is often quoted is Trinadapi Sunichana said one should chant the holy name. One should chant the holy name in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself low on the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree and devoid of all sense of false prestige. So these 4 things that if we really want to enter spiritual life, we should be a little humble. And what is the example of humility is grass. Grass is just stepped on. Nobody thinks about the grass. And one time I heard one of my teachers say, well, if we're like the grass, if you step on the grass, oftentimes the grass just doesn't get up. So sometimes when we're stepped on, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is an opportunity to be humble, just don't get up. And I thought that was a really nice meditation of what it means to be humble. Because sometimes we think, oh, grass, like, it sort of goes up and down. But no, sometimes it just stays down. Then a tree is very, very tolerant. You can ask anything of a tree will just give. And then no respect. If we are a humble servant, then we know that that's just what we should be doing, serve. And we don't need recognition. A nice example of something that doesn't get a lot of respect is salt. When you have a really nice meal, nobody entering the meal says, that meal was really nicely salted. Unless they're cooks and they say this in jest. Because no one in his right mind will say that, right? But what happens if there's absolutely no salt in the meal? It's missing, right? So it's like so a devotee should be like salt. You don't get respect, but you're present in such a way that people don't notice you. And one of the things that I have learned in just my years of being around and getting some training is that one way to really cultivate the consciousness of a servant is to be attentive. That's really all that's needed. It's just pay attention. Because if you pay attention, you'll find out what, as a servant, you need to do that nobody is paying attention to, and that if you do it, nobody will see that it needs to get done. And then you do it. And there's great satisfaction in that. And that's actually more than being a servant. What's a greater secret than being a servant? And these things are almost unspeakable, but just because I'm here and I've been asked to speak, I can say some of these things. Because I've received instruction from some amazing people in this movement. And somehow or other, by their association, I've learned a thing or two. And so the greater secret than being a servant is actually being able to relish the enjoyment that you get from being able to serve. And then seeing that what is that when I'm really trying to, in my mind, live these verses. Because the Trinadapi Sunichana verse, that be more tolerant than the tree, more humble than the grass, devotees meditate on these verses for years, for decades. And it's amazing how deep you can dive into it. And then when they become alive, it's like nectar. And then we have the actual experience. And so when we share that, it's something that is confidential. Because what is confidential? And so one way that confidentiality was explained to me once, and I think I mentioned this last week, but it's such a beautiful example. Because sometimes we say secret, but we still speak about it in the open. Then we use the word confidential. Because if you share something that is confidential, and you really don't know what's going on, it might not speak and go into your heart. But when we speak of the confidential things in bhakti, because this is the soul, and we're all servants of Krishna. So when we're exposed to the knowledge, and that's what I'll get to the verse, because the verse is about knowledge. So when we're exposed to this knowledge, it goes right into the heart. And then that's why we speak of revelation. Because something that's revealed, it was already there. It's just revealed. Which is why if you're really awake, no one will be able to cheat you. Because somewhere, if someone is out to cheat you, you'll know. Because it won't feel good. Because in your heart, you actually already have the truth. So this confidentiality is explained as family pictures. Right? I may not know some of you that well, and some of you I'm getting to know. And so if after a time one of your good friends comes to you and shows you a picture of his family, because that is something that he wants to share. And that touches your heart, because your friend just shared something that is personal. But it's confidential information in a way, because somebody who doesn't know, like if I go out on the street and show pictures of my family to a random stranger, they might just say, in California, everything's cool, dude. But still, that doesn't really speak to them. So this is what is confidential. And so when we read Bhagavad Gita, when we approach this knowledge, it's confidential. And so what we then, through teachers and people who share their knowledge, these things come alive. And then maybe in due course we can share it as well. We can go out, because one other thing that when I started to come to the Laguna Beach Temple about a decade ago, I was hearing about outreach, or sometimes a word that is used is preaching or just sharing. So whatever word you use, but it's like, how do we let people know what's going on here? And I just looked at myself. It's like, I don't know anything of bhakti. I don't know the philosophy. And then someone said something really interesting, and he said, even if you don't know much, and some people don't even know what's going on here, but they know this is a Krishna temple. So if you just know this is a Krishna temple, and where's the temple, and you run into someone, and you say, oh, you know what? Maybe you should go to the Krishna temple. That's already outreach. That is sharing. That is preaching. And so if you know that the Sunday feast starts at 3, if you know we have a Wednesday program that starts at 6, we have a Saturday program that starts at 7:30, there's a lot of information you can share. And so when you run into someone, you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe you can come to the Hare Krishna temple. That's, there is some information maybe for you there that will touch your heart. And so that is how I wanted to introduce the topic for tonight. So let's see, we can chant the verse together. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram yavidyate tat svayam yoga samsiddha kalenatmani vindati. Nothing. He, certainly. Jnanena, with knowledge. Sadrisham, in comparison. Pavitram, sanctified. Iha, in this world. Vidyate, exists. Tat, that. Swayam, himself. Yoga, in devotion. Samsiddha, he who is mature. Kalena, in course of time. Atmani, in himself. Vindati, enjoys. So when I distribute books, sometimes I open a book and I show people, especially the little books we distribute. My favorite book is the Nectar of Instruction, and also, but the same goes for the Ishopanishad, that the original Sanskrit is included. And so I open up the book and I say the original is included, and it's quite impressive. And then I say it's transliterated so we can read it like we've just done. And then there's a word for word. And the word for word makes the whole work, just by having the word for word, makes it very scientific. And sometimes when we go into the word for word, we can see that different words at different times are differently translated by Srila Prabhupada, who gave us the word for word. Because here yoga says in devotion. Sometimes yoga is translated as linking, but here Prabhupada translates it as in devotion, because linking to the Supreme is really an act of devotion. So when I go through these verses, when I go through the books, what I try to do is really always have in the back of my mind that it's Prabhupada who's speaking to me. And so what should I pick up? Because it's, even though I may sit with the book by myself, Prabhupada is present in the book. Like this was, it was produced by a person. So I'm really dealing with a person. And the more I have this idea of personality in my mind, the more I notice I am open to really see some of these details that are in there. And these books were put together so meticulously and so wonderfully that in every little corner of the text, I can find some inspiration. So when I just read this, I said, hey, yoga, oh, in devotion. And then I get enthused. And it's, if one thing, and it's, sometimes I try to make sure that I don't get too carried away, that, because it is so wonderful to be filled with enthusiasm. It's utsahan. It's one of the 6 principles that Rupa Goswami tells us that makes our success in bhakti. And it's really success in anything, right? So what's the goal that we have here? The goal of life for us is to know and love Krishna, right? And so how do we get there? We get there by following some instruction from a teacher who's achieved the goal. And what they tell us to be enthusiastic. So my enthusiasm I find in reading these verses over and over again, and then sharing my enthusiasm with others. The translation is as follows. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Let's read the purport. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. Thus, knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service. And when one is situated in transcendental knowledge, he need not search for peace elsewhere, for he enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in the Bhagavad Gita. So we can just pause right here for a moment. There are a few other verses that we'll jump to, and we'll see how far we'll get. But I wanted to share with you a story. A story this happened in Laguna Beach. It's a story of a devotee, a really amazing saint who I met there. His name is John Riggs. And John grew up in Laguna Beach. Maybe some of you may know, we have a temple in Laguna Beach. It's right on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway. There's a beautiful terrace outside. It overlooks the Pacific Ocean. It's about a block and a half away from downtown Laguna Beach, and it's a part of the heavenly planets. Really, it's quite amazing. You can live there and never leave the town. And I stayed in that temple for a little over 3 years, and I hardly ever left. It was quite phenomenal. And so John Riggs was born there and went to high school there. And let's see, this was somewhere in the early, 70s. And so John typical California, tall, incredibly handsome man, smart. He was a very good athlete as well. But he figured in the end of high school that, you know what, all this sports and competition, not for me. He was very expressive. And so he joined the arts part. Like he went to study drama. and his coaches were very upset. But that's what he did. And somewhere around that time, he also discovered, hey, there's some Krishnas in town. So he started going to the Hare Krishna temple on Sundays, brought some friends, and made good friends with the Hare Krishnas. He got a Bhagavad Gita. He read some of the books. And then life took over. He was an art director for Hollywood, worked with, some of the, he did a lot of, not major movies, but there's so much, we know here, so much media is produced, that he was involved in making all these promotional films with, a lot of nonprofit stuff that he did, but with big names. And so he would come and go, and why am I telling you this? He was a Sevite at the temple. He was the gardener when I was there. So in his life, he had a pause from Krishna consciousness. His life took over. He had a wife, 2 kids. But when I met him, he would come and he would take darshan, and he would come to the Friday Gita class. But most of the time we would see him, he would spend hours in the garden taking care of the garden. And then sometimes for like a week or 2, we would, or 3, we wouldn't see him. He'd be working a lot. And then all of a sudden, we'd see him 2 or 3 times. And he was, we had the community of the temple, and he was not living in the building, but sort of like the first one, the closest to the community. There's sort of these circles of influence, where it's like, almost like, and we have that here too, right? And everyone's invited to be part of all the circles, but we just see everybody finds their place. And so this one summer, we didn't see John at all, most of the summer. And then at the end of the summer, we saw him. And he had lost, 40, 50, maybe 60 pounds. He was a big guy. And I was like, John, are you sick? He's like, no, don't worry about it. I'm fine. 2 weeks later, we got notice that John did go to the doctor, and he had esophagus cancer. And later he told us that over the years, he'd been sick, he'd work hard, and then, because in his line of work, sometimes there's 2 months of work, and you don't work for 10 months. But in the 2 months, that's, you make the year. That's kind of like how we do book distribution. The days are different, but they're always the same, right, when you do a day, because that's just whatever level you hit. And then slowly, you may increase a little bit, you may go down a little bit, but steady wins the race. So sometimes books are flying out. So sometimes he'd be working a lot, and his body would give out, and he'd be able to nourish himself back. And he thought this time he'd nourish himself back. Well, he got a little bit more than he bargained for. And so it looked like some of the last days of his life had come, and we would visit him, and there was a bed in his in one of the rooms, and I remember going to see him, because he kept the devotees at bay a little bit, just to figure out really what's going on, and it really looked like, okay, John's going to leave. And so I went with some devotees, and we were alone with John, and it was really amazing what he told us. I mean, and what I didn't tell you is that John would come and do the garden. Like I said, he would take darshan. He would come to the Bhagavad Gita class, and also on Sunday when he was there. But in his house, there were no deities. His family were not particularly devoted, or not Hare Krishna devotees. I'm not sure if John ever wore tilak or a dhoti, but he was 100% surrendered to the Bhagavad Gita. And his family always said that for when they had meals together, he would. I'm not sure exactly what the procedure was, but he would always say, "You're not the body." Right, and so here we are with John. And basically, the last time I saw him was maybe a week before he finally did leave his body, and he looked at us, almost like a little like giddy, of like, "Oh my God, what just happened?" Because his wife had just closed the door, and he said, that was the hardest thing, to disconnect myself from my family and my children. He had 2 daughters. He said, but it's done. And we're just like, okay. And so as John was really getting ready to leave his body, the devotees made arrangement for someone to be there with him. because, just to have some devotees around him. And I remember I spent the last night, which eventually he left on the morning. I spent the last night with him. And when somebody got me, and we can see afterwards that John arranged everything perfect. He was very much in charge. And the last moments were phenomenal. And this is really why I'm telling you the story, because that it shows that he is really a saint by just reading Bhagavad Gita and by taking the knowledge that's in here into his heart and seeing that the knowledge that this verse speaks about, the purport and the peace that culminate in Krishna consciousness was there in John, and all the devotees afterwards were so amazed that I even remember the pujari who said, who's a Bengali boy, from or Bengali man, by that time 25 years I think in the movement, and he was like, if I leave my body, I want to do it like that. And so what happened the last moment of his time here on this planet, his mother had asked his wife had asked his mother to come, but John didn't ask for his mother. But his mother happened to be there. His wife left to get John to get something, walks back into the room with a glass of water. So John looks at her and goes like, that's very nice. You got me a glass of water, but I'm trying to leave my body. And then she looks at him and he goes like, are you ready to go? He's like, yeah. And she asks him, do you see the light? He says, yeah. And he takes 2 or 3 more breaths and he's gone. And so when I later heard this, we all were. For part of us, the temple president there, he's got young kids. They were bawling like anything, crying, because we just lost our best friend. Right? It was so heartbreaking. And later, actually, which was totally phenomenal, and we spoke about this, because what happens when we study this, strikingly brilliant things happen. Chatmakar, remember? For the verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Kaviraj Goswami invites us to use to be analytic and to use discrimination. Right? And so strikingly wonderful things happen. So we had a farewell ceremony, like to say goodbye to John. He was cremated and all that, but we had a service. We had the service on a Sunday. We'd never done that before. Sunday feast, and it's a commemoration of a member of the community. How is that? But you know what day it was? Gita Jayanti. It's like, you don't make these things up. And so then during that day too, people came forward and spoke about John. And remember when I was talking about Trinadapi Sunichana, that we should be tolerant and humble? And all of a sudden people came forward who didn't know much about John's part in the Hare Krishna movement. John had his, what was part of many different circles of influence. And so all of the circles came together in the temple, and everybody started sharing, and people were amazed of how saintly this person was and how unassuming. Remember we talked about salt before? So John actually embodied being salt. And even the devotees who thoroughly and appreciated all John's service, because John did an amazing job, and the garden was doing phenomenal, and he put so much heart in there, so much love and devotion. And so he did that not just to the temple, but also to individuals, and some of those individuals came forward. And then let's say the cream was an email that the temple president received maybe a week later of devotees who came up from San Diego. They had been traveling. I don't think they were local. I think they were from the East Coast, but don't quote me on that. They had seen one of the Swamis, I believe, in San Diego, and came up for the day and wanted to go back to see, Maharaj's Sunday lecture. But somehow or other, Laguna Beach is such a nice town. The temple is so idyllic, and Prabhupada Prabhu wrote in his email that he reads, he's a member of Chad, chapter a day. And so some people of this community, they read one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every single day. And there's many different ways of how you can do that. And his chapter for that day was chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. It's a long chapter. And he may or may not have read the whole thing, but it was long enough to keep him there so that the Sunday feast started. And they're like, okay, well, we wanted to hear Maharaj is there, but, now we're here, so let's stay. They sit down, and they go like, what's going on? There's a memorial service? I thought it was Sunday feast. All right, well, we're here now. So they're a little disappointed. Then, Kirtan starts, and all of a sudden, this effulgent personality, which later they found out was the temple president, entered the room, and the Kirtan went to another level. So they're like, oh, okay, now this is interesting. Because sometimes it happens, when the devotees show up and you notice that a rise in Kirtan. It's like, wow, okay. Because some devotees, or a lot of devotees, they doing long years of service are dedicated, and they have some potency, right? Pratyaksha, you can actually experience it. And so he noticed that when the temple president came in, and he was pleasantly surprised. Wow. What a wonderful jump in Kirtan. And Kirtan in Laguna Beach is always wonderful, because it's Panchatattva that is there. And so, okay, great. That was, but let's see about this memorial. They weren't so sure yet. And then they start hearing a person's life as I just described it to you. And maybe not with the details of his leaving his body, but, just a Vaishnava saint is being described. And when devotees hear the glories of other devotees, they're like, okay, keep on talking. I want to hear some more. And it's like their hearts become really happy. And so the devotees had such a phenomenal experience that they wrote about it and sent this, their experience and sharing their experience to the temple president, that they were very happy. They stayed and they felt blessed to actually that, they were part of that and experienced that. And so when I read this, that if we speak of transcendental knowledge, that, and I'm sitting here with, dhoti, kurta, tilak, and, that's the externals. And that's good, it works. We do follow regulative principles. But, they're sometimes we're blinded by all the rules and regulations. And so if we then pause and look like, well, what's really going on? Because bhakti is not sectarian. It's not stereotypical. And so when we really read this and transcend whatever it is we are, or what we think we are, human beings with a particular locality, then our experience becomes very, very peaceful, and it ultimately culminates in Krishna consciousness. So let's jump to another verse, 442. And let's go to the translation. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart, out of ignorance, should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. And so I picked this verse because here knowledge comes out again. So we'll read the purport. The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatan Yoga. Mahabhavi Prabhu, yeah, I'm reading from there, sorry. Thank you. Or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions of sacrificial actions. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then such sacrifice becomes material. But One who performs such sacrifices with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. When we come to spiritual activities, we find that these are also divided into two, namely, understanding of one's own self, or one's constitutional position, and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita, as it is, can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him, there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self, as part and parcel of the Lord. And such understanding is beneficial, for such a person can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. In the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Supreme Lord Himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless, and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord, as the eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead, is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by... Where are we? Okay, sorry. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices. To demigods, sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashram Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated action. But within all these activities, the important factor is self-realization. One who seeks that objective is the real student of Bhagavad Gita. But one who doubts the authority of Krishna falls back. One is therefore advised to study Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture under a bona fide spiritual master, with service and surrender. A bona fide spiritual master is in the disciplic succession from time eternal, and he does not deviate at all from the instructions of the Supreme Lord, as they were imparted millions of years ago to the Sun God, from whom the instructions of Bhagavad Gita have come down to the earthly kingdom. One should therefore follow the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is, expressed in the Gita itself, and beware of self-interested people after personal aggrandizement, who deviate others from the actual path. The Lord is definitely the Supreme Person, and His activities are transcendental. One who understands this is a liberated person from the very beginning of his study of Bhagavad Gita. Thus, end the Bhaktivedanta purports the 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge. So what I find when I read these purports, and the reason why I read this purport, is that it really connects nicely to the other purport, and it's another wonderful example of the depth of Prabhupada's teachings. Because there's so much there. And so in the beginning, when we come to spiritual life, and we may be here, for the first time, or there may be still things in the back of our head that we haven't fully accepted. And so I was once advised, or even someone suggested, hey, if you find a philosophy, if you find something in life, and 60 to 70% of it is like sort of acceptable, and 30% of it is like you're not sure, you're actually doing really, really well. And so here, what did we run into? Varnashram Dharma. What? Varnash Ashram? What is Varnashram Dharma? It's like, we can speak on Varnashram Dharma for a long time. There are 4 Varnas, 4 ashrams. The Varnas are priestly class, the Kshatriyas, so there's the administration, the people who run the organization of the society. There's the business class, and then there's the working class. So those are 4 Varnas. And then there's ashrams. There orders of life we go through. We are students. Then most of us have married life. At some point we retire. And then hopefully the last stage of life is a life where we're fully dedicated to the Lord. And so if we look at how society is organized and how people fit in that society, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And if you go and analyze some of the problems that happened, especially in the history of Europe, is that this system wasn't implemented very well. And how? Because the top class, so to speak, the teachers, the priests, the brahmanas, the spiritual masters, the instructors, they didn't lead the people so well. And so when the priests don't lead well, who starts a revolution? The kings, right? And we can see that in Europe, that the church was there was a revolution of in England. The king just took over. They go like, okay, forget it. It's like, well, I'll be the head of the church. And then when the kings didn't work so well, who then starts a revolution? It's the bourgeoisie, right? The business people. That's the French Revolution. And then wait a minute, if the business people, if they don't work well, what's the revolution? The workers start the revolution, right? So there you have the Marxism and the revolution in Russia. So when it goes from top down. And so when Prabhupada came, one of the things, there's so many wonderful stories of Prabhupada, and I heard this from Ravinda Sarup Prabhu, and he always, when he tells this, it's a really short little thing, but when he tells it, he says it with so much, it's so enjoyable, and it's, there's affection, and before I tell you the story, is that what we see, or what I see in devotees, is devotees are very affectionate. And once I was in a class I think it was in Houston, and there was a senior brahmachari, I don't remember his name, he was speaking on purification, but he didn't really say how to purify. And so at the end of the class, I asked a question, like, well, you speak of purification, but how do we become purified? And one of the things he said, he gave a list of 5, I forgot most of them, but the one I remembered, he says, be affectionate. So to be affectionate is purifying, but what to speak of receiving the affection of a senior Vaishnav, right? It's very purifying. So Ravinda Sarup Prabhu, he says when Prabhupada, I'm not sure, it may even have been in Philadelphia, but don't quote me on that. And I believe it was a question that Prabhupada was asked by a reporter. It was like, why did you come? And Prabhupada's just one-liner, to give you a head. Because what's missing in society is the head. It's like the leadership of people who are surrendered to Bhagavad Gita, as it is, to the teachings of Bhakti, to the Lord in a non-sectarian way, and are not attached. Right? And in this age, it's very difficult. So I'm almost tempted to really go into it, because we ran into Varnashram Dharma, and maybe it's the first time you hear of it. There's a lot to be said. In the early days, Prabhupada didn't stress it so much, and later he said, this is 50% of what I came to do is not accomplished yet, and it's establishing Varnashram Dharma, that we just really organize the society so people can actually be peaceful. Let's jump to another verse. My Adi Lila. Chaitanya, it's already lined up. And let's just do the translation. I read this earlier today. I'm trying to study the Chaitanya Charitamrita somewhat in depth. And so I ran into this and said, this is, again, transcendental knowledge comes back. And so when I prepare a class, I know I can come and tell you stories like anything. But what I try to do is then bring it back to the text, because that's safe. Because I'm a rascal. It's like I've shared with you what I believe is, the biggest secret is to be a servant. And then what is a bigger secret is to actually relish being a servant. But there's a bigger secret than that, and that's about myself, that I'm really an ignorant fool. And so if I stick to the text, you won't find out. But if I speak too long and give you too many stories, at some point you're going to click, you know what, you're right. And so when you have that, and it's actually, in German they say Aha-Erlebnis, when it's like, now I get it. And I hope that, it'll happen to you, and I hope that it has happened to you, because it's so wonderful when that happens to you. When someone in class speaks something that you've heard again and again and again, you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. And one day, somebody says it, and you're like, whoa, that went deep. Because there are a lot of teachers in this movement. I'm not one of them, but there are some teachers in this movement that when you listen to them, they have such deep realizations. And actually, there are a lot of these people, and there are a lot of people that are trained this way. I'll share something with you since I'm on and we'll get into the verse. I was so pleasantly surprised, and sometimes we judge everything on our own level, and we don't see the bigger picture. So I had the good fortune to be in Germany last year. I spent not last winter, but the previous winter in India, studying Bhakti Shastri. I returned to the U.S. for some service in Kansas City. We spent 2 months there, and then I went back to the Netherlands to make some arrangements. And part of the opportunity that I received when I went back to Europe, because I'd been living in U.S. since 2000. So this is in 2000, May of last year I left. So I'd been living in U.S. for 16 years. And I spent a good chunk in Europe. And some of it in Germany, and I visited various temples. And there was a program with Satchidananda Swami Maharaj. And Maharaj had his Vyasa Puja. So we had a gathering of disciples that everybody was invited to, because it was Guru Smarana. It's like the remembrance of Guru. And because it was a 4-day event in Golokadam, and it was and this is around Nityananda's appearance day, and so Nityananda's a spiritual master, right? So and so it was very much the whole festival was focused on who's Guru, how do we serve Guru, who am I as his disciple. And with a lot of affection, it's like it was a very relatively small gathering, and very very open, very intimate also. And it began on the first day. I think this was the second day when we had the meeting, when one devotee shared what he was asked by another devotee, and these were Satchidananda Swami Maharaj's disciples, and one devotee, I think it was the temple president who was asked this question, and he gave the introduction for the was the first kind of introduction of now we're having our festival together. And the question he was asked by his godbrother, how has your relationship with Gurudev, with our teacher, developed over the last year? A very simple question, but very personal. And this is what Madhavananda Prabhu was here, and he taught us what is the relationship with a spiritual master? How much are we conscious of that relationship? Because that relationship is also for a very large part in the heart, and it's something that we can always work on. And so I think his name was Gaurahari Prabhu, I believe. He was taken back a little bit, like, wow, this is a deep question, and have I contemplated this enough, and have I worked enough on this? So that's how it started. It was very nice, the idea to get started. And then we had a meeting where people shared their realizations and experiences. And one of those really struck me. And it was a young woman, I don't remember her name. She said that a disciple of Satchidananda Swami, she said, I come to Maharaj's classes, I come to our teacher's classes, And they're very structured. Satchidananda Swami is a renunciate. He's German, so his classes are very structured. So they're 1, 2, 3 this, A, B, C, D that. It's like we got this part, that part. And he really prepares and he puts it all together, and it's a class. And you can he doesn't put it on a PowerPoint, but it's like it's just very structured. And so she said, I would come to his classes and I would appreciate the structure. But I perceived it in a way, it's like he's prepared a class and it's nice, put together. It's my spiritual master, my teacher. It's fun, it's great, but that was just it. And she said at some point she had an epiphany. It struck her, the aha-erlebnis of like, whoa, wait, and that is Guyam, right? Something confidential was going on and she didn't even know it. What is the subject of Maharaj's classes? The subject of Maharaj's classes is his spiritual practice. He has a spiritual practice. That spiritual practice has he has certain insights, certain realizations. There's fruit from his spiritual practice. That what comes out of his spiritual practice, he teaches others. And then as he teaches others, people can have those same insights, those same realizations as he has. Because what are teachers? Teachers just are sometimes acharyas. That we say, what is an acharya? An acharya is someone who teaches by example. And we follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas. So how do you follow in the footsteps? By someone, okay, he put his foot there, he put his foot there. So what's he telling me? He's telling me where he's putting his feet. And if you follow in those footsteps, what will happen? You'll make spiritual advancement. Well, what happens if you make spiritual advancement in bhakti? Guyam, confidential. These things are almost unspeakable, because what happens? Your heart becomes soft. What happens? Trinadapi sunichana. You become a little bit more tolerant. You become you become a better servant. And then at some point, when you sit in your service is to listen, you actually become ecstatic. You don't become just peaceful, you become ecstatic. Why? Because now you're excited, because you've seen that those 2 little steps that you've taken running behind the teacher have actually given you progress. So now when you come to a class, and this is what she was saying, and I'm embellishing a little bit, but this is truly was all there, because this is how I've been trained, of like, guess what? If you pay attention to the teachers, then if you're lucky, and I've been to classes where you just pay attention, and you're like, okay, there's benedictions that will come. And you should keep your ears open for benedictions. You should, when you read the scriptures, you should see, are there benedictions? And then see how your life changes when you actually open your heart and say, I'm willing to receive this benediction. And the strikingly wonderful happens all the time when you are attentive and when you stay in that consciousness of just wanting to serve. Because we're serving in an amazing movement. And so the joy that this woman spoke with, that she now realized that her spiritual master, her teacher, is actually sharing some of his most intimate realizations with his students, because he's just blazing the path. And she doesn't expect to be right on his heels. She doesn't expect to outdo him. She may or she may not. And there's no competition to outdo on the material realm of like, I am better than you. That doesn't exist in bhakti. But to be able to do service is phenomenal. Is really, really pleasant. So that I wanted to share with you and what came to mind. So let's get back to the verse. Please hear attentively what I shall speak to you. For transcendental knowledge about me is not only scientific, but also full of mysteries. And those mysteries, like I said before, you can experience them. And my part of my meditation has been the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and really looking at the verses that give benediction or that predict something. And the one that I've been focusing on a lot is the strikingly wonderful, that strikingly wonderful things will happen. And I'll share one more thing with you before we pause and I can get some reflections from you. Because as I'm looking at the scripture, as I'm looking at what has happened in my spiritual life, I can tell you here that, I can report to you, this actually works. Slowly, I remember how I was. I remember my disturbance. I remember I suffered from anger. And it's not entirely gone, but it's a lot better. And that's by simply doing the process. And so now, by really, really getting, sometimes you got to take out a fine comb and really, really go deep and figure out, okay, does this work? Right? And so as a spiritual scientist, so to speak, I've taken one verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita and see how does this apply? Does it actually happen? And on more than one occasion, wonder has struck. And I call it synchronicity. Or at least, it's like that's what. Because what is striking wonder? Striking wonder is when Krishna makes things happen. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Satchitananda Vigraha, Nadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam, right? Krishna is the Supreme Lord. He's the Supreme Controller. So he can make anything happen. And he sits as the Lord in your heart. And so when the Lord in the heart makes something happen, then you can't figure out how he did it, but you sort of know it's like he did it because it's strikingly wonderful. And so what was my last day? Yeah, it was yesterday actually. I stopped we were at the Dhyana, and I stopped a man, a young man, probably in his early 20s, and somehow or other, quite soon in the conversation, I'd usually just stop and say, book distribution's fun and easy. You may know this. You just raise your hand and say hi. And on college campuses, excuse me, sir, you're a student here. And students just go yeah. And then they stop. What is it you want from me? And then I usually, go into my book distribution routine. I give them a book. I say I'm a monk, and kind of are you a go through my mantra. But I didn't really go through my mantra with this man so much, because one of the first questions I asked him is, "Are you in the military? Have you been in the military?" I was a soldier in the Israeli military. I was trained as an infantry soldier, and so sometimes I relate to people because I looked at, "You've been in the military. You must have been in the military." And he smiles at me. He goes, "No." I said, "You should be. Really, my dad tells me that all the time too." And I said, "Oh." And so I did, I kind of laid it on heavy. And then at the end of the conversation, I gave him a nectar of either a nectar of instruction or an Ishopanishad. I'm not sure which one I gave him. And told him that the book is going to make you successful. And I said, just tell your father you met me and that I told you the same thing. Because this is synchronicity. This is strikingly wonderful. How can I know that your dad tells you this and I just told it you because I was forceful. And I was like, why was I so forceful? Striking wonder. Little thing, but you go oh yeah, it really works. And to come back to Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu is one of my Shiksha Gurus. He's given me a lot of instruction. I spent 1.5 years with him. And one of the things that he really turned me on to Super Soul, right? Because there are 3 ways of understanding the supreme absolute truth. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance, all-pervasive, localized, and personal, right? All-pervasive, Brahman, localized, Paramatma, Bhagavan, the supreme personality, right? An individual. So, some people go to, everything is one, brother. It's all one, right? We don't get any, you just, it's like, that's it. Om Shanti Shanti. It's all, and it's true. There's nothing but Krishna and his energies. It's all just one. But there's no activity there. And if you take that, there's all is one to the extreme, really weird things start happening. At least when I thought all was one, and some guyam between you and I had there's working hypotheses. I had the working hypotheses, I may be God, but I'm not sure. Now I'm sure, believe me, I'm not God. Because God is always God. And so, all one, but above that, and sometimes we say this as stages of realization. First, you realize the supreme absolute truth is all-pervasive. And even in knowledge you can understand. Everything comes from the source, so nothing's different from the source. That source ultimately is a person. Okay, that's pretty simple. But beyond that is that, okay, the source is also localized as the Lord who sits in the heart of all living entities. He's all-pervading in his localized feature. And when you tune into the activities of the Lord in the heart, your life becomes your life and the experiences become strikingly wonderful, because you can't see the Lord. He's in the heart. But you can see his activities, and those are strikingly wonderful. Like I just explained to you, the one little thing that happened to me. And these are just little things. And if you notice in your life, and you start the day with a spiritual practice, right? You chant some japa, you meditate, you pray, you read some spiritual literatures. You'll notice throughout the day that you're elevated, you're open, and if you're conscious and aware, pay attention, these things will happen to you as well. Because, and this is what I've learned from my brothers who've trained me, is that bhakti is universal. And so if you have intelligence, it's like you just take some instruction, go do it. If you have no intelligence, then you're like, find someone who has intelligence, have them give you instruction in bhakti, and go follow it. And you will see through direct experience that you will actually have the direct experience that the science of bhakti yoga actually works. We haven't read the purport yet, have we? No, we haven't read the purport. Okay. Purport. Transcendental knowledge of Sri Krishna is deeper than the impersonal knowledge of Brahman, for it includes knowledge of not only his form and personality, but also everything else related to him. There is nothing in existence not related to Sri Krishna. In a sense, there is nothing but Sri Krishna. And yet nothing is Sri Krishna, save and except his primeval personality. This knowledge constitutes a complete transcendental science. And Vishnu wanted to give Brahmaji full knowledge about that science. This is a little detail of where we are in the story. The mystery of this knowledge culminates in personal attachment to the Lord, with a resulting effect of detachment from anything non-Krishna. There are 9 alternative transcendental means of attaining this stage: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshipping, praying, assisting, fraternizing, being a friend with the Lord, and sacrificing everything for him. These are different parts of the same devotional service, which is full of transcendental mystery. The Lord said to Brahma that since he was pleased with him, by his grace, the mystery was being revealed. So again, a wonderful example of how deep these purports are. And so I've taken you from 2 verses in the Bhagavad Gita to a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, dealing with knowledge and mystery. I've told you the story of John Riggs and some of my personal experiences with my life in Krishna consciousness. So the other thing that I wrote down for myself here is the experience of Krishna consciousness. We've spoken about Trinadapi Sunichana and about being humble. Another experience in Krishna consciousness is an attitude of gratitude. And you want to ask a question? Yeah? Navina Prabhu? Okay, let's pause for a question. It's a good time to do that.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Harinam Prabhu. You were mentioning you were taking reflections, so... Yeah,
no, it's good to stop, or else I'll just keep on going. Thank you.
I just wanted to give you a break, so...
Yeah.
Slow down. I really liked the stories, the mood, the example especially that you mentioned about the salt, that a spiritual practitioner should be like salt. He mentioned how the salt does not take any credit. It is very unassuming. In fact, it is inconspicuous. And sometimes it only gets noted when it's not there. But then there's also the other extreme that there may be too much of it. And it is also being noted. So could you elaborate a little bit on that part? Because we have this yo-yo effect of bouncing back and forth. You were mentioning how being a servant really means to try to be of service with a mood and an attitude to please, and to really achieve that synchronicity, that connection with the Lord of the heart, and to know how much should I be present, tender loving care and tender loving neglect, how to balance these two. Because sometimes we just need to step back and let people come forward and make their own mistakes. And at other times we should really be there and, as you said, speak strongly when so inspired by the Lord in the heart. So what is your personal example of how to achieve that balance of when to be forceful and when to back off?
Hare Krishna.
Which can be kind of like the title of this talk, the mature fruit of all mysticism.
The mature fruit of all mysticism, yes. That was, well, thank you, Navina Prabhu. Let's go to something Srila Prabhupada gave us. The Nectar of Devotion, chapter 21. It should be lined up. Because it's strikingly wonderful that you bring this up, because I wanted to read this. I believe it's a main key for what you just pointed out, where we can not be present, or we can just, in a mistaken way, be humble and not speak up. And then things just go wrong, because we do have an insight that maybe there should be a correction, but we're too humble to say anything. Or we're overwhelming, and every little thing we're just just the hammer comes down, the hammer comes down. And a good way to balance it, even making mistakes, because I think one thing's for sure, we're going to go wrong. Then the question is, how do we deal with if we've gone wrong? What's the right attitude? And what I found is that if we have an attitude of gratitude, if we approach things through gratitude, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to say something. Even though, it's like I'm taking a risk, but I'm doing that because I care. And sometimes when I'm filled with gratitude, and I may it may overwhelm me, or I may be overwhelmed and wanting to continuously, correct people, and I can easily fall back because I am already satisfied. Because part of this experience of being salt is actually a state of satisfaction. And if we can grasp that state of satisfaction, then automatically if something needs to be said, we'll say it unassumingly. And something should be said, but you know that it's not the right time, then you can easily let it go. So let's read this, because this is a list of qualities of Krishna that are described. And it's grateful. Any person who is conscious of his friend's beneficent activities and never forgets his service is called grateful. In the Mahabharata, Krishna says, quote, "When I was away from Draupadi, she cried with the words, 'Hey, Govinda!' This call for me has put me in her debt, and that indebtedness is gradually increasing in my heart." End quote. This statement by Krishna gives evidence of how one can please the Supreme Lord simply by addressing him, "Hey Krishna, hey Govinda." The Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is also simply an address to the Lord and His energy. So to anyone who is constantly engaged in addressing the Lord and His energy, we can imagine how much the Supreme Lord is obliged. It is impossible for the Lord to ever forget such a devotee. It is clearly stated in this verse that anyone who addresses the Lord immediately attracts the attention of the Lord, who always remains obliged to Him. So if in any situation we find ourselves that we need to speak up, if we remember Krishna and remember how grateful He is, we can also see, well, if I speak up, how will that be perceived? Ultimately, will that result in, yeah, this will be better and people will be grateful? Or is it not really the right time for me to speak up right now? And it'll be a little bit of a disturbance. And then, because here we see that we're servants. You know, we call out to the Lord. And so sometimes it may just be that we can do something through a prayer. And then we can think of the Lord, and we know that through Him we get our satisfaction. I think this is where it gets a little mysterious. And I'll share a little bit of my experience and some of the instructions I've received of how to deal with this. One is that when you're engaged, how can you tell if Krishna is pleased? Well, there's one really easy way is to ask the devotees and see if the devotees are pleased, because you'll know if the devotees are pleased, Krishna is pleased. And sometimes, and it happens when in your heart when you do service. It's happened to me a few times. When you do service, you become happy, and that happiness is something that comes from the deity. It's somewhat mystical, but I had this experience in a kitchen. I was working with one of the brahmanas, one of the priests, and they asked me, "Are you feeling happy?" And I kind of did an internal, it's like, "How am I feeling, Maharaj?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm really happy." And she's like, "That's because the Lord is happy." And so when we receive instructions from seniors, we can follow their lead. And I was happy to receive this insight. And so now sometimes I pause and go like, well, let's see. How is my service being perceived? Because we do have a connection. The Lord sits in our heart. And so when the Lord is satisfied, this is what is called the experience of bhakti yoga. It's the Lord in the heart, an experience of satisfaction. So we can tune into our heart. And our heart tells us a lot of things. And so yeah, through gratitude and through just paying attention, through our meditation on Krishna. So let's continue here the purport. Another instance of Krishna's feeling of obligation is stated in connection with the dealings with Jambavan. When the Lord was present as Lord Ramchandra, Jambavan, the great king of the monkeys, rendered very faithful service to him. When the Lord again appeared as Lord Krishna, he married Jambavan's daughter and paid him all the respect that is usually given to superiors. Any honest person is obliged to his friend if some service has been rendered unto him. Since Krishna is the supreme honest personality, how can he forget an obligation to his servitor? So it gives us a little bit of an indication on how to deal with, how to speak up when it's called for, or how to just really, pause and maybe not say something. And the one thing too that I found is good, that give it time. And so instead of immediately saying this should be corrected, then just wait. Because sometimes it may not be my service. And if it is my service, I have to find the right timing. Because sometimes we're talking about knowledge. Because if you may be right, but if someone is not ready to receive the knowledge, it'll be perceived as a disturbance. And so the one thing that we're instructed to is to not disturb any living entities, even when we're right. Does that answer your question, Navina Prabhu? So it's really, now that we're on the subject of gratitude, and I've done this exercise, and it's a fun exercise. If you want to, you can do this at home. Is to write down all the things you have to be grateful for. And I found when I did this exercise that I have so much that I'm grateful for that I couldn't, it's like I can speak for hours. And I when I was given this this exercise, I took 3 hours to write it all down. And the first thing, and I'll share that with you, and then I'll ask you. So as I'm telling you this, please think of the things that maybe you want to share that you have, that you're grateful for. And the exercise that we were given is in a letter to someone. You can state it in a letter, you can write it, and it doesn't have to actually ever have to be sent, or you can keep it to yourself. But it's easier if you have someone that you address it to in a particular realm, because then your mind will actually jump onto things that you're grateful for, that you want to tell this person. And so during the Bhakti Shastri studies that I did, one of the teachers said, write a letter to Srila Prabhupada telling him everything you're grateful for. And so I did that exercise, and we were able to share that in the class. And the first thing I wrote down is that I'm grateful for my parents. My parents, and I particularly always thank my father, but it came from both my parents. But I see that my father gave me the message. When I was a young boy, my father told me God exists. And I'm so grateful for this message from my parents, that they gave me the seed of spiritual life. And my parents are educators. They're school teachers. So I was raised by the book. And then, because I was a young boy, when I was a teenager, my father reinforced his teachings to me. It's something, it's just, also in the book. It's like, okay, you do this, and then later, he when I was a teenager, I remember he sat me down. He's forgotten about it, but I remember very well. And it's the reason I am here. It's the reason why I'm enthusiastic. It's the reason why I get carried away about this knowledge and the things that this knowledge reveals, is that there is a need in this society for spiritual life, for religiosity, for something that is real, for something that is true. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. Some people don't like the word religion. Some people don't like the word spirituality. Whatever word you use, this personal connection to the absolute truth, in whichever way you have it, that was given to me by my father, who, when I was 15 or 16, or at least in my teenage years, he sat me down and he said, everything that we taught you, you can forget. Just disregard it all. Doesn't matter. But that one thing, and he used the word religiosity. Religiosity in your life, please don't give that up. You may, if you want to. I'm not going to hold it against you. But if it's up to me, if you want to throw out everything, keep that. That was his message. And so that I have like an immense amount of gratitude. And what I found is cultivating an attitude of gratitude, it brings issues like Navina Prabhu brought up, is that yes, we should be salt, and we shouldn't be completely absent, but we can't be overbearing. How do we find the middle ground? If you have cultivated an attitude of gratitude, it is very easy to keep on that middle ground, because you're peaceful, you're not disturbed by what's going on, and you'll have finesse to be present when it needs to, and to make sure that you're not overbearing when there's no need for it. So this is a good point to pause and ask you for reflections on the class, and if you or something that you have in your life that you would like to share that you're grateful for. Up to you. Yeah. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for bringing up so many points in your class and connecting them with your personal examples, experiences. This is really helpful because this knowledge we read in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, sometimes we think like they are like philosophy, may not be practical for our day-to-day life in this current situation, but eternally it's always applicable in whatever situation you are in. And the example you have brought about Bhakta Jan Prabhu, that's really very touching. It reinforces our faith in Srimad Bhagavad Gita that the teachings is so deep that even a person is not taking Krishna consciousness fully, but he is sincere to Srimad Bhagavad Gita's teaching and practices internally, he can achieve perfection. Because what the perfection we know from Bhagavad Gita is like remembering Krishna at the time of death and be conscious. The explanation you have given about his leaving the body, that he was fully conscious, he could see the light. That means he could see that, the presence of the Supreme Person around him, I guess. Anyways, that was really touchy for me. I definitely will take that example with me. And about gratitude, I really feel like, whatever Krishna has given me in my life, I'm grateful to him for everything, like my parents, my family, the Sangha, the ISV Sangha which we are in, the darshan we are having of Radha Madan Mohan, Mahaprabhu, Lakshmi Narasimha. These are very, this cannot be compared to any of the material things we have. These are like something which we have, I have earned without any cause, without doing anything by myself. It just, by mercy upon me fall upon. Yeah, I just feel like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we have an audience, so we always make sure that we use the mic so that the audience at home can also hear. So thank you for that. Yes. Hare Krishna.
If you want me to speak without the mic.
No, so use the mic, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for giving such lucid examples of John and others, and describing it so vividly and all that is very moving, and it just shows that there are people who show their love and affection and especially devotion through their action very silently, and then we can really learn the divinity and go by that. The main point that I was attracted to your talk this afternoon is that you mentioned about the 4 varnashramas. Yes, true. The varnashramas were necessary, I believe, even during the time when I was infant in India. When I grew up, you see, as I was born in the Brahmin Vaidika Shastri family. Therefore, I knew what we were to do, and the support from the other 3 varnashramas were also necessary for the Brahmin and the leadership, so to say, who kind of govern and all. The point I want to share with you, Prabhuji, is this, that in each varnashramam, the importance is that's how I have come to decipher or discern at this advanced age of this body, that also by Sri Krishna's grace, he says you should share this. That is, in each varnashramam, we should, it is good to understand, as was shared by one of the doyens of the spirituality, that is, Shaishave Abhyasta Vidyanam, Yavane Vishayeshanam, Vardhake Munivritinam, Yogena Ante Tanutyajam. So I know you understand that. So should I give the English translation?
Please.
Okay.
I'm not such a Pandit, Prabhu.
No, this is no Pandityam. It's just reciting that doesn't mean one is a Pandit. So one has to really understand it.
Yes.
And then adjust to the understanding and practice it in every moment in the journey of life.
Yeah.
So that one reaches the abode of Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. So the Shaishave Abhyasta Vidyanam is, they just categorize, say a person is to live for 100 years, let us say, the body.
Yeah.
Then they say 25 years of, let us say, the first
student life.
Yeah, or a Shaishavam they call it. That is, you can say student or
take instruction,
childhood or infant to coming to the youth. And then during that period, one has to really master the vidya, that is knowledge part of it, really master it. And then Yavane Visheshanam, that is in the second half, is practice it by understanding how the Lord is present in everywhere.
Correct.
And so this vidya helps one to seek the presence of the divinity in that experience in the second half. And then in the third half, Vardhake Munivritinam, that is one distances from kind of having to possess and be attached to all these things and becomes more renunciate. Munivritina.
Yeah.
Becomes a Munisha. He guides one how to become a Muni, Now, then the last part of it is the fourth quarter. Yogena ante tanutyajam. That is, you are connected in the yoga or union, Krishna consciousness. And in the Krishna consciousness itself, you just leave the body, just like John did, and things like that. So, this is in the just a summary of it is.
Yes.
Every varnashramam, it is recommendable that this is imbibed, and then the journey becomes a little more direct to Shri
Thank
Krishna.
you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any other reflections, things you're grateful for? There's something else I wanted to read, but anyone else? Can we go to the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 14? So it's quite a long chapter, but there's some really nice points being made here in the beginning. Some scholars recommend that knowledge and renunciation are important factors for elevating oneself to devotional service. So you can see that why I picked this here, it speaks about knowledge. And Prabhupada's going to bring in a little bit of a nuance, which I thought was interesting to bring up. But actually, that is not a fact. Actually, the cultivation of knowledge or renunciation, which are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness, may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected, for devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. And that's, in a way, the mysticism of bhakti, where we start with knowledge, the mature fruit of all mysticism, and then we go somewhere else and we discover, wait a minute, even knowledge will leave. And Prabhupada says, in the beginning it's required, because you may not know where the Krishna temple is. Remember in the beginning of the class, I was speaking about outreach, and that when I first came to the temple in Laguna Beach, I didn't think I could do any. But if you know where the temple is, even if you don't go there yourself, and there have been examples of people who've been sent to a Krishna temple, who have become Krishna devotees, and who were sent there by people who'd never been to a Krishna temple, but who know where the Krishna temple was, and said, you know what, you should be a Krishna, there's the temple. So if that happened, I'm already at the temple, I can tell people where the temple is. So that little bit of knowledge needs to be there in the beginning. But then when we really get serious about our practice, what remains? Right? We spoke about what remains is gratitude. Because gratitude, if you have an attitude of gratitude, what's the knowledge that is there? There's knowledge there. But our gratitude and our Krishna consciousness transcends that knowledge. Because what remains is sincerity. It is the opinion of expert devotees that mental speculation and the artificial austerities of yoga practice may be favorable for becoming liberated from material contamination. But they will also make one's heart harder and harder. They will not help at all in the process of devotional service. These processes are therefore not favorable for entering into the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Actually, Krishna consciousness, devotional service itself, is the only way of advancing in devotional life. Devotional service is absolute, is both the cause and the effect. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause and the effect of all that be. And to approach Him, the Absolute, the process of devotional service, which is also absolute, has to be adopted. Something came to mind. There's so many wonderful stories. What is this devotional service? And how does it manifest? And so one way for us, the way devotional service manifests, is in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So there's a lot more that follows here. But I was just reminded of a saint in our movement during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Krishna came 500 years ago in his incarnation as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to relish what it is to be a devotee. And there were other devotees there who relished with him this devotional service. And so we've heard about knowledge, we also heard about mysticism. And somehow I told you a little bit about my parents, what they told me. There's some mystical streak in our family. It may be a little base. In Europe, they even call it witchcraft. It's a mixed bag, and we can put all sorts of labels on it. So please don't hold me to any of these things, because it's just not anything in particular. But I'm attracted by this word mysticism, and so some things that are very mystical attract me, and some things that are mystical don't attract me so much. But the attraction I'll explain to you. There's a devotee, his name is Haridas Thakur, during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he is known as the Nam Acharya. He's known as the teacher who teaches us how to chant Hare Krishna. And he was born, apparently, in a family of Muslims. He was older than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is before the story I want to share with you is that it was before he was in the association of Mahaprabhu. He was living in a town, and some people were not so happy with him being from Muslim background and chanting Hare Krishna, apparently a Hindu practice. So that was a sectarian way of looking at things, which was not in Haridas Thakur's consciousness. He was very happy chanting Hare Krishna and not being very much attached to either his background or anything. But he acted, appropriate in his dealings. But so there was a complaint, and eventually he was brought before the magistrate, and he was told to stop chanting Hare Krishna. Now, one of the things that I remember from this story is that one of his replies was, "That's all well and good. Do with me anything you want to, and I can just tell you, if you chop me up into little pieces, then every little piece of me will just continue chanting Hare Krishna." And I find that it's a little gruesome, so don't make too much of a picture. But it's cute. It's how he was attached to the chanting of the holy names, and in a very colorful way, expressing his desire to chant and his attachment for chanting, and also the importance of chanting, because he's unwilling to give it up. And so the magistrate said, "Okay, fine, have it your way, no problem." So one of the punishments back in the day, this is 500 years ago in Bengal, they had capital punishment, and the capital punishment was death by beating with sticks. And so what they would do, and it's mentioned in the scripture, they would take people to 22 marketplaces. Don't ask me why 22, but no one ever got past 2, 3 if that. Because it doesn't describe how big the guys are with the sticks, but you can imagine, not just one. It doesn't say how many people there were. But they took Haridas to marketplace number 1, and they beat him senseless, or at least they tried to. And Haridas Thakur, as they were beating him, was chanting Hare Krishna very happily. But he didn't die in marketplace number 1. So somehow or other, they drag him to marketplace number 2. And there in the marketplace, they start beating him. But, lo and behold, marketplace number 2, he didn't die. All right, so on to marketplace number 3. And you must imagine that the guards are the guys who are trying to kill him, and have been given the service by the magistrate to kill this man by beating him to death in 22 marketplaces. They've never seen anyone go much further than whatever beating they've already given him. So in 3, 4, 5, and 6, he's not dead. 7, 8, 9, 10, he's not dead. They go to 22 marketplaces. He's not dead. They're like, how is this person not dead from a beating in 22 marketplaces? He's chanting Hare Krishna. And so at the end, they're like, okay, well, that was the punishment. We've had all the marketplace. There's nowhere to go. But if we go back and we report that we haven't done our service, we will be put to death. So Haridas Thakur has been chanting Hare Krishna all throughout, looks at the guys, the men who had the service of beating him, and sees they're despondent. And so he's a nice Vaishnava. He's like, what's wrong, guys? You seem not so happy. And they're like, you're not dead. And he's like, okay, is that a problem? It's like, yeah, that's a problem, because if we go report you're not dead, we'll get punishment. We may be put to death Because the magistrate is going to say, you can't kill him, I'll show you that I can kill you. Oh. So Haridas said, you want me to die? And they're like, yeah. He's like, okay. So he doesn't die, but he goes into a yogic, slumber, so he appears to be dead. They actually take him back. They show us that the man is dead, and they're like, what do we do with him? Well, he's a Muslim, he should be buried. Muslims need to be buried according to their faith. Somebody said, no. Because if he's buried, that's according to religious principles, he'll get some sort of salvation. This man should not get any salvation. Throw him in the Ganges. So they do. So Haridas floating in the Ganges, he comes to, goes to the bank of the river, gets out. Guess what he does? He walks back into town. It's like, hello, they just, he walks back into, and then he was received, and it's like, okay, he's a saint. Then later, so that's the story of, Haridas Thakur's being beaten in 22 marketplaces, right? Just phenomenal. That, okay, it's phenomenal he survived, and then it's phenomenal that he walks back into town. Just like, hey, what is it? And he convinced them that, you know what, just accept the chanting of Hare Krishna. There is a pastime that's connected to this. It's called the Mahaprakash Lila, where, and you know what, I don't have the quote with me, but there's also a quote, which is in Chaitanya Bhagavat, and I'll paraphrase it when I'm done telling you what happened. During the Mahaprakash, and you must know, when the Lord came as Mahaprabhu, he did not show his godliness. He didn't show his opulence. He did not show people that he didn't act as God. He was recognized as God by but he didn't act as in his supreme position, except for on a rare occasion. And one of these occasions is about a time spent of about 21 hours, where he was in this mood of his opulence of the Lord. And in that time, for all different devotees. And one of them he called, in front of him, was Haridas Thakur. And then at some point, he said, Haridas, remember when you were beaten in 22 marketplaces? Haridas said, yes, I remember. And then Mahaprabhu showed his back. Mahaprabhu's back was blue. And you must know that his complexion was golden, but his back was black, like bruised. And then he said, when you were beaten, I came. Because I came to rescue you and kill those men. But the only thing you were doing is you were praying for their welfare. Lord, please don't kill them. Lord, please don't kill them. How could I kill those men when you are praying for their welfare as they are trying to beat you? Haridas, with this you have purchased me. And so because you for their welfare, I could not kill them. But what I did do is I put my own body over your body. That's why Haridas Thakur survived and lived to tell about it, because his body didn't take the beating. The Lord took the beating for him. And that's when I introduced the story, said, it's mystical, right? This is it's mystical. How this is, we're left with wonder. How are these things possible? What in 500 years ago, the Lord came and had his pastimes. And in a way, you can say you can't think of these things, but when we hear about them, they go through our ears into our heart. And that, what happens is our heart gets cleansed. Because there's, at least for me, there's a lot of dirt in my heart. It's like and this is when we started, why are we here? We're not here to hear a lecture. We're not here for a sermon. We're here for Sangha, and in that Sangha of devotees, what happens? We speak of Krishna, and right? Confidential things will be spoken of. And some of that confidentiality is very mystical. Because Who is Krishna? He's the supreme mystic. And so, if we're attracted to some of these things, like I've told you I am, then we can relish these stories. And also when we ran into, this Varna Ashram Dharma, it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't understand. But if something sticks, if something in the entire span of Krishna conscious activities, if I like hearing, if I like chanting, if I like maybe cooking, whatever it is that are my propensities, we can focus on that, and we can cook for Krishna, or we can hear, the Prabhupada lectures, other lectures. I like to read, and so we can find what our heart is drawn to, and then mine, and this is another maybe. I mean, it's a mundane example, but when we gold, we go around, and at some point you actually strike gold, and that's the beauty of it. Because make no mistake about it, there is Krishna. No matter how much I have, this atheism in me, I know that's because, as I told you, my father told me God exists, and it's implanted so deeply in my heart. And now when I meet devotees, especially when I read Prabhupada's books, when I'm exposed to this, I am struck with wonder, and I try to mine all these gems. And I think, and we'll finish with that. We have a few minutes, maybe a question, and then we can just put everything away, and Arti will start in a few. I'm going to leave you with that because I'm very sorry I lost my train of thought. But if there's any questions, maybe a reflection, because in another 2 or 3 minutes we will have Arti. So another reflection or a question? So let's read that then. Maybe one more paragraph. Can we scroll down a little? Yeah. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the Lord Himself. One can understand me only through devotional service. In the beginning, His teaching of the Gita, the Lord said to Arjuna, "Because you're my devotee, I shall teach these secret things." You know what? My thought came back. Why? Because it speaks of devotees. And that's just what I wanted to stress. Because I told you I'm looking for something that is strikingly wonderful. The Lord sits in your heart. And the things He does, sometimes on a daily basis, are strikingly wonderful. But really, what is for me, one of the most strikingly wonderful things is the devotees of Krishna. It's like the people that I've met in the Sangha, devotees, are phenomenal. People that dedicate their lives. And it doesn't matter if they are monks or if they're, whatever their situation of life, they're householders. It's like, this is Kali Yuga, so there are a lot of hybrids out there. I'm one myself. And so, meeting the devotees of the Lord, and it's something that you should look for, because this movement all over the globe, and I've been only in a few places. I've traveled the United States. I've been to the Netherlands, Europe, and India. So just a few pockets here and there. But my good fortune has been that I've met a lot of people, and as there are here, so many wonderful devotees of Sri Krishna. So, all glories to the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Grace Harinam Prabhu ki
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.